Okay, so today we're going to be talking about materials, and materials are a huge thing when it comes to creating a decent rendering. Materials and lighting are probably the two biggest things outside of maybe your modeling. If your model looks a little clunky, then that can be a dead giveaway, but your materials and your lighting are huge things when it comes to making a rendering look real. So materials probably even more so than lighting. So we're going to get into that a little bit today, and I'm going to show you some of the do's, don'ts, what to use, what not to use, and all of that. So I'm going to come up here and create we'll just use a brick wall here for reference. Okay, so I've got this wall here, and if I come down here, I've got these different graphic styles. I can hit realistic, and it'll give a kind of best guess as to what this is going to look like. So as just a frame of reference, I'm going to do a quick rendering here. So basically, the way rendering works in Revit, the first pass through is your lighting, and then the second pass when the image shows up is it calculating your image. So basically, as you go through rendering and things like that, you'll notice the first half takes a while or the second half takes a while. That just depends on your settings and what your model is and that sort of thing. So okay, so basically you see this this brick wall here. It looks alright, doesn't look fantastic, so let's just save this to the project and we'll name it. Okay, so that gives us kind of a frame of reference for what this thing is going to look like and how we might change it to look better. So close that out. All right, so I'm going to come up to Manage Materials. Now, in terms of materials, there are only a few materials built into Revit that I would recommend you use. Brick is not one of them. Any of the woods and the kind of things that have a lot of depth to them, so like brick has, you know, your grout lines and all that, I would stay away from using those. They tend to render and look a little flat, and especially your woods. You can see the texture here, but when it renders, it doesn't render even as great as it shows there. So it ends up looking, you know, just a little off. You want to show a little bit more grain, and as you can see, this has kind of a light spot, two little light spots, and then a dark spot in the grain, and you're going to see those stripes running down whatever it is that you apply those to over and over and over again, and that's going to give you kind of a heads up that, you know, it's not really really a great texture. Some of the things that are decent, stainless steel, so your kind of metals are pretty good in Revit, as well as glass. So stainless steel, I would never go to a polished. Polished is super shiny. Semi-polished usually works out pretty well and gives you the stainless steel effect that you kind of want. But other than that, I would create my own materials. So if we go to this brick common here, this is the same material that's applied over here to the wall, and we're going to change this and make it better. So right now, if you come down here, the relief pattern, what this is this is a black and white version of the image that's being applied here. And basically the way it does images is it takes this picture and then it places it next to itself over and over and over again. So as you can see here, you see these three bricks kind of grouped together right here. Based on the size of this image, and we can set the size of that image, it's going to repeat those three big bricks over and over. So you see those three there, you see them there, you see them there, you see them there. So if you get something like that, this brick wall, you start to see lines in it. And that's kind of a high sign that, you know, it's a rendering, because you see the same patterns over and over in the textures. So, but another thing that adds depth to these are these black and white images. So we take this and we turn it into a black and white image, and the program detects what is light and what is dark, and we can start to drag this up and down, and it makes the dark come forward and the light go back. So that can be a good thing and that can be a bad thing. Here, obviously, we've got some grays in the bricks themselves, but in our grout lines we have some white, and then we also have some dark based on where shadows happen to fall, and that doesn't create for a great bump map, which is what this black and white image is called. It's called a map. So, but if we, right now it's set to 0.15, and if I drag this all the way up to say 2, you see how this updates and gives us a little bit more depth to it. So if I drag that up to 2, I can hit OK, and then let's go ahead and render this again really quick, and we'll see what the difference is between the two. So you're seeing a little bit more texture to it, maybe not a lot, but even in the rendering you can see those same bricks repeating over and over. It's not super obvious, but once you kind of pick up on it, it's going to be something that you notice all the time, and it can get really obnoxious if you have a texture that repeats itself over and over. I will warn you, stone is a really hard one, because you end up with a stone that has a slight reddish hue or something, and it jumps out over and over and over again all throughout any rendering that you do. So let's save this as test 2. And then we can come over here, and it's created a little renderings section within our project browser. So if I drop that down, I can go to the first one and then go to the second one, and you're not seeing pretty much any difference between the two there, right? So dragging that bump map up to 2 rather than 1 or 0.15, which it was at before, isn't helping us. It would be nice if we could crank this up to say 30 and really get some depth going there. That would be helpful, but it doesn't let us. So the trick to fixing that is don't use this material. So we're going to come up here and we're going to hit this little button here. It's called like replace this asset. So we replace it, and under appearance library there are all these materials that Revit has built in that they might not have over here. So just because it's not here doesn't mean Revit doesn't already have it built in here. So even things like your metals. So I showed you there's a chrome, there's a stainless steel, stuff like that already built in. Well, there are all these other metals that Revit has built into it. So you can come in here and find all sorts of different stuff. But the trick here is we want the generic material. So this under default generic, if we double click on that, it applies it here. Now the reason I use this for every material that I end up doing is because this gives you the greatest flexibility to create whatever you want out of a material. So if I come down here, I want to change this brick to some brick that I have. So I'm going to say, go to my textures that I've got, and let's say we go under stones here. Let's see, do I even have a brick texture? Let's hope so. Maybe not. Well, let's go to, let's create something with some bump, and I'll show you the difference here. Okay, so stone, we'll use stone for this one. And we'll say we're going to apply, let's apply this one. Okay, so right now this is difficult to see because this is kind of a sphere with a little hole cut out of it. If I change this little drop down here, I can change what I'm looking at. So let's say I put it on a wall. So this doesn't look great right there. I can also change the quality here. That'll slow down the update and everything, but it gives you a little bit better idea. I usually keep it on medium. It doesn't give you such a bad idea of what's going on. But right now, this image is, I'm seeing a lot of the same thing over and over, which means this image is probably a little too small. So I come down here and say Edit Image, and this is where I can change all sorts of things about this image. So this image is pretty much a square, so I want the height and the width to be the same. And what I'm telling it is how big is this? How big of a sample size is this image of this material? So from here to here, how big is that? And I'm going to say I named my materials based on general sizes. So this stone 2, 66, 66, 66. That means it's about a 6'6" swatch and 6'6" the other way. So if I type in 6'6", then it's going to apply that. And you can adjust, you can offset it one way or the other if something's not lining up just right. You can also rotate it, so if for whatever reason something's not reading horizontally, if my brick was going vertical for some strange reason, you can go ahead and come in here and just change that and it'll fix it. So hit done. I don't want any glossiness to my stone. And then I'm going to come down here. I don't need any cutouts. I don't need transparency or reflectivity. I need a bump map. So I come in here for the bump map, and I have the same material just with a B at the end, and that's my bump map. So there's that. I need to say that this is also a 6'6" swatch. I'll say done there. And remember how this was at 0.15 and we could drag it up to 2? So let's make that 2. And we'll say OK. And we want to go back to our 3D view here. Okay, so we just changed the brick to stone here. So let's go ahead and render a quick view of that at bump map 2 to give us a baseline here. Now, like I said, stone, this is all an even kind of tone, so this isn't too bad, but like I said, you see the same two stones over and over again, so it can be a little iffy. So we'll say stone 1. Okay, now let's go back to our materials. And remember how I said this gives you a lot of flexibility? I have the ability to crank this up to 1,000 now. Before, I had 2. Now I have the ability to crank it up to 1,000. So let's crank it up to say 150. And I'll hit OK. Now you can see I'm really starting to get some texture to the stone rather than just the grout lines. So if I render this again under medium, and let's see how that did. So I'm starting to get a little bit of texture to each one of the individual stones, as opposed to just the grout lines starting to recede a little bit. That starts to help. Obviously, the corners, it doesn't do the corners. So if I had another stone wall going back, it creates a really harsh line. And I'll tell you how, when we go into this kind of stuff, I'll show you how to fix that. It's not something we're going to fix in Revit. We're going to go about this and fix it in Photoshop. So let's save this as stone 2. And let's go to stone 1. So there's stone 1, there's stone 2. And you can notice a visible difference between the texture that you're getting off of that. This is all pretty smooth and flat. This actually gets it looking a little bit more like stone. But if I come in here again and I say, okay, now I want to crank it, I'm going to crank this up to 500. And let's see what that looks like. So if I render this again, now it's going to give me even more kind of texture. And maybe this might even be too much. And that probably is. This is getting a little bit too grainy. So find somewhere with a happy medium to kind of generate the look that you're wanting. But in terms of materials, that generic application of materials helps a ton, because you have the flexibility to crank up bump maps, you have the flexibility to add transparencies, reflectivities, whatever you need to do to make your rendering look nice. That material has the ability to add that stuff. So if we came into materials and say, my stone, for whatever reason, wasn't looking, the color that I want here, that's not looking quite right, so I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add a tint. And I'm going to add like a little bit of a brownish tint to it to kind of change the hue. And let's darken that even more so it's pretty pronounced. So you can see it starts to change, that sort of thing. You can adjust the colors and stuff on the fly. We can add little cutouts, so that's similar to a bump map. It'll read the blacks and the whites, and it'll take one of them, and depending on which one you set up, it'll cut out the black areas of an image, or it'll cut out the white areas of an image. And that's how you can create things like chain link fences, perforated screens, all that stuff can be done using cutouts. Transparency is exactly what it sounds like. You can set a transparency to it. You can also set translucency. So things like frosted glass, you can set that up in here, where it allows light through, but maybe it's not transparent and it starts to glow a little bit. You can also add that glow as a self-illumination, so a material can actually emit a little bit of light and kind of glow itself. And then reflectivity, so you can add how much of a reflection you want off of something. Do you want it to be mirror quality, or do you want it to just have a little bit of shine, like some things like a high gloss floor or things like that? You add a little bit of reflectivity, so then when you're looking at it, you get some reflection of all the other parts of the room off the floor, and that can look really nice. So that's the nice part about this generic material that we've applied. We can make it do pretty much whatever we want within here, and that's why I use it for pretty much every material I create. So I've shown you a stone, but things that you can also apply, I mean, we could come in here and do granite. We could do, I have a bunch of miscellaneous, some of these look like absolutely crazy, and things you'd never have a texture for. I use them for if I'm doing a really modern space and there's some modern artwork and things like that. I'll throw one of these on there. Some of these are a little crazier than others, but you throw some sort of big splash of color on a big ornate vase or something like that, and it adds a little flair to it. Other things, I've got fabric. There's just a couple fabrics in here. And then I have an entire section of book covers. The reason for this is you do a bookshelf that has a ton of different books on it. You don't want the same book repeating over and over, so I just come in here and grab one of my many book covers, create maybe 15 to 20 different materials with different book covers on it, and then your bookshelf actually starts to read like a bunch of different books as opposed to something really generic. So other than that, in terms of controlling material size, is a big thing. So coming in here and adjusting your size to get that right. There are some generic things in here, so if you wanted to create a gradient to a wall or a checker pattern, things like the speckle and the noise can be really good for creating like stucco finishes. So if I come in here and say speckle, right now the size is set at like a 0.04, which is probably alright. It might be a little big if we go to 0.2 for a stucco finish, and we'll say done there, and then we'll say color. Okay, so let's make this, we'll make this like a tannish color there. But then down here, let's turn that bump off. That way we're not getting a stone bump map on top there. But we do want to apply a bump map, and we want to apply the speckle finish, and we want it to be 0.02 as well, so that everything lines up. And then right now, see how we're set at 535, and it's creating this really intense speckle there. So let's take that down to, say, a 60. That's still a little heavy. So let's take it down to maybe a 20. And we're getting there, and then maybe a 10. So that starts to look a little bit better. We got a tint color on there, so if we change that and we render this again, now this should be more like a stucco finish. Yeah, so we're starting to get a little bit of fleck to it, and that starts to create, the look that maybe you're going for with some sort of plaster or stucco finish wall. And obviously you can change the size of these if these look a little too big to you, or if you want a little bit larger swath, then you could definitely go for that. But in terms of materials, it's not difficult to create them. It's just a matter of playing with them and getting the right thing you want. The big thing is finding the material texture that you want. And I'll show you real quick what I mean by one of the hardest ones to do is a wood texture. To get a good wood texture, I have a whole bunch of them in here. There's wood flooring, just straight wood textures. So I'll come in and add a wood texture here, and this is, I would say I'm just going to keep that at 1 foot by 1 foot for now. Let's turn the bump map off, and let's also turn our tint off. We're going to stick with just the image for now. And I'll say OK, and show the model. Okay, so you see how much this is tiling, and you can see the same image over and over and over again, and it starts to get really repetitive. But it's not very often you're going to use a wood texture that's going to span a really long way. So one single piece of wood spanning, 8 has a decent amount of height to it. It's not very often you're going to show an entire full sheet of plywood, for instance. So a lot of times it's a kitchen cabinet that might have a door that's 18 inches wide and it's 2 foot 8 inches tall. So then you're not talking too bad. So I'll come in here and change this, and I'll say, okay, let's make this actually a 2.5 foot swath there. So that might actually be quite a bit bigger than what this image actually shows. But to enhance the grain and not tile quite so much, I'll make it a little bigger than it wants to be. And then if my cabinet door actually ends somewhere right in here, then I don't get that tiling pattern, and it actually ends up looking fairly nice. So, for instance, actually, if I show you one, like this might work. And let's go to something here. Okay, so if you see here, this is that exact same texture that I just showed you there, but on these cabinet doors you don't see that tiling effect near as much. You just read it as, okay, it reads as wood, it reads similarly all the way around, and it actually doesn't look like it's tiling over and over. So if you play with the size and you actually break it up a little bit, it's not actually too bad. Same thing here. This is a really long stretch there, but you see how this widens out here. This is the exact same as it is over here, but over that stretch you don't notice it near as much. So that's something that we can play with, and when you guys start to get into your projects a little bit more and get materials, that'll be something we'll spend some time on, your material textures right and all of that. So like I said, that's the exact same as this. It's just since this is so long, you're seeing that same repetition over and over and over again, which isn't very likely for a lot of wood stuff. So that's materials. There are other aspects to materials that we could get into, but for what we're going to be doing, that's a pretty good introduction and a good kind of base point for you guys to start with. And as you get into different stuff that maybe is specific to your project, then I can start showing you guys some other little stuff in class. All right.